Alright class, now that we've learned about the different types of experiments that we can do, we're going to learn how to identify two types of variables called independent and dependent variables. So first of all, does anybody have any idea about what the words independent and dependent mean just in any context, not necessarily science? Yes, Lexi?
Dependent means it depends on something else.
Yeah, very good. Jory?
Independent means that you do by yourself.
Good. So you can use those concepts and kind of come up with a definition for what independent and dependent variables are. So an independent variable is the thing in an experiment that the experimenter changes himself. So it doesn't really depend on anything else, like Lexi said, or Jory said. And as Lexi said, the dependent variable depends on other things. So it's what the independent variable is changing. Now that sounds kind of confusing, so I'll come up with an example to illustrate it. Let's say you're doing an experiment where you're trying to figure out if the amount of water you give a plant affects how tall it grows. In that case, you're changing the amount of water, so that's an independent variable, and the height of the plant is the dependent variable. So what if we had an experiment where you're trying to measure people's shoe size and see if their gender has any effect on it? Does anybody know what variables would be independent and dependent? Tyler?
The gender would be independent and the shoe size would be dependent.
Very good. Do you know why that would be?
No.
Okay, so why did you think that gender was independent?
Because you pick someone with a certain gender.
Yeah, so the experimenter is choosing it.
Yes.
And then the shoe size is dependent because?
Because the shoe size depends on the person and their gender.
Yeah, good. All right, now let's get in groups of 3 and try and come up with an example of yourself for yourselves, and then every group will share to the class at the end of 2 minutes.
Like how high the kite will go.
I mean, we might need to word that a little bit, like how big the kite is and like how high it will fly?
Yes,
okay.
Size of the kite and
Size
how
of
high
the
it will fly.
Okay.
All right, do you guys have an idea?
Yeah.
All right, let's start sharing. So this group, what was the example that you guys came up with?
So we said the area of a kite versus how high it flies. So
Okay, so which variable would be which in that case?
So the area of the kite would be the independent variable because you could change how big the kite is.
Okay.
Oh, and then how high it flies would be the dependent variable because it depends on how big the kite is.
Okay, good job. So now that we can kind of have a grasp on how to figure out what an independent and a dependent variable is, there's another aspect, and that's if you were trying to show this on a graph, which axis would you put each variable on? So let's draw a graph. So the x-axis is the horizontal one, and just based on what people have always done in the past, this x-axis is always the independent variable. So, for example, in the example that you guys gave of the area of the kite and how high it flies, what variable would be going on the x-axis?
The area of the kite.
Yeah, exactly. So you could put the kite area here. And on the y-axis, you're always putting the dependent variable. So what would be on the y-axis?
How high the kite flies?
Exactly. How high? All right, now that we've learned how to write a thesis statement, I've come up with a cheer that we can use to remember it whenever we write an essay in the future. So it's a acrostic, which we'll learn about later. T stands for take a side, so like take a position on whatever topic you're writing on. H is how or why, because you have to include how or why you chose that position. E and S come together, explain with 3 specific reasons, because in your thesis, as we talked about earlier, you include 3 reasons about why you chose your side. I illustrate to create a graphic organizer so you can put all of your points in that, and then S, start to write. All right, everybody stand up and we can do this together. Ready? T, take a side. H, how or why. E, explain with 3. S, specific reasons. I, illustrate. S, start to write. Good job.